Hi there. So I thought I would do another example of how to find your exegetical idea, your purpose, your homiletical idea, and as you are choosing how to structure or to begin to structure your sermon. So today I'm going to look at a narrative and see how we would do that when we come to the genre of narrative. So in this example, my passage was Daniel 1-6. That's the pericope of my text, so that's quite a big chunk of narrative scriptures. But I wanted to try to see when I'm coming up with my exegetical idea, which is what is the main idea the biblical author is trying to communicate in writing this text to his audience. I'm using my exegesis to find that out. So what I wanted to find, what is the main idea that the author is consistently giving us in the first 6 chapters of Daniel. And one thing I noticed has something to do with keeping a faithful witness to God, or maintaining obedience to God. So I'm trying to come out of the fog. I'm trying to clarify and get a little bit more clarity on what I see. But maintaining a faithful witness to God maybe is too broad. That could, again, cover a number of different books or chapters. What about this particular situation? Can I get my idea more specific? So as I began to look a little bit more at the first 6 chapters, what I consistently noticed is every single time Daniel and his friends find themselves in a predicament, everything is different. They are exiled to Babylon, so they're in a different land. They are in a different environment. They're in the king's court, so you're in the elite of the elite, or maybe you're in the king's administration, so you're in the politics of the nation. Everything is new. New consequences to if they don't obey, new gods to worship, new rules to follow. They find themselves every single time in a new situation, and how to navigate this new situation that they find themselves in this new land with these new beliefs and different gods and a different environment that they're living in and finding themselves in. So I tried to narrow down my exegetical idea even more. A true believer maintains a faithful witness to God no matter what situation they find themselves in. And so that's one thing I definitely noticed every single time with Daniel and his friends. But what I also noticed every single time in each story is God shows up. God is actually the real hero of every story, because we see when Daniel and his friends are faithful to God, God is faithful to them every single time. They are more fit than the others that eat the meat. God sends an angel to protect them from the fire. God sends an angel to shut the lion's mouth. So we see God's faithfulness to his people who are faithful to him. So if I were taking all of these things that I'm finding, what is it the author's talking about, and what is it that he's saying about what he's talking about? I'm going to try to combine all that together to my exegetical idea. In fact, I would update the exegetical idea I put in my outline here to say something like, God is faithful to those who are faithful to him no matter what, or no matter what the circumstances, God shows his faithfulness to those who are faithful to him. So I'm trying to combine all that I'm seeing in one sentence. If we are faithful to God, no matter the circumstances, God will be faithful to us. So I'm combining what I see into one sentence, and that really becomes my exegetical idea. That seems to me the main point that the biblical author is trying to make consistently throughout these first 6 chapters. And then I'm going to look at purpose. Now, purpose helps to guide me as I am coming up with my exegetical idea, helps to guide me with my homiletical idea. Purpose even helps to guide me as I structure the sermon. But The purpose of this book, Daniel is writing to his fellow Jewish exiles living in Babylon. And it seems that his purpose is to encourage the other Jewish exiles that are there, that have found themselves in this new situation, in this new environment like Daniel has, to encourage them by helping them to keep their eyes on the bigger picture, that God is still in control over history, that God will be faithful to his people who are faithful to them, that God is not done with his people. He will one day restore them back to their land. He will keep his promises that he's made towards his people. So the book tends to want to encourage those that Daniel is living amongst, his very own people, to encourage them, don't give up. Don't stop worshiping God. Don't give up on God. Keep your faith in God. Keep your obedience to God, because God is in charge of history. He will not give up on his people. He is faithful to his people, and he will restore them as he has promised. So that seems to be the author's purpose in the book, and that's now my purpose in the book. And at the time that I preached this, we were going through the fruit of the Spirit, and they asked if I could choose one of the fruit of the Spirit, and I chose faithfulness because I had been grappling with for a while, have we as a church been faithful to God in the midst of COVID? Have we kept a faithful witness to him? Has the response of the church been what it should be? And I was really struggling with this, especially at the time this sermon was preached, because even Ramaphosa said we could open the church to 50 people, but our particular church said no. They still believed it was too unsafe. So even when the government said we could open, we, the church, were staying closed. And I wanted to challenge my audience with Daniel's purpose. Are we maintaining a faithful witness to God no matter what? And encouraging people, we need to keep our eye on the bigger picture. God's in control. God will be faithful when we're faithful to him. He doesn't give up on his people. And to encourage the congregation to not give up on God, to keep your faith in God, to not give up, but to maintain a faithful witness to God no matter what situation we find ourselves in. So that purpose that I found in the book of Daniel became my purpose. Okay, so as I was choosing how to structure this sermon, I also went with the deductive style of structure because I wanted to talk about how can we practically maintain a faithful witness to God for a lifetime. How can we do that? Well, how did Daniel do that? Let's look at some principles we see from Daniel of how he maintained a faithful witness to God in his life. So I'm really kind of explaining how to maintain a faithful witness to God no matter where we find ourselves. So I chose to go with a deductive style sermon where I present my main idea at the beginning, and then each point explains my main idea. Okay. And then finally, homiletical idea. How do I take my exegetical idea and repackage it in a way that my audience will relate with it, connect with it, remember it, where it will sink in to my modern day audience? Well, of course, we're in the middle of COVID, and that's on everybody's mind. And so I used language of disease and chose a homiletical idea, faithfulness that is contagious. And as we look at Daniel and his friends, their bold example of faithfulness is contagious, and it does challenge us. Am I maintaining a faithful witness to God no matter what? Like Daniel and his friends, am I trusting that God will be faithful to me if I'm faithful to him? So faithfulness that is contagious is the homiletical idea that I put forth. And as I went through point by point by point, I tried to use homiletical language in my points so that my audience would remember the different points. So how do you maintain a faithful witness to Christ? Well, let's look at Daniel and his friends. How did they do it? The first thing was circumstances doesn't determine faithfulness. So they found themselves in a new set of circumstances in the king's court with new dietary rules. They're in a new land, but that did not change their faithfulness to God. Circumstances doesn't determine faithfulness. The second one was consequences doesn't deter faithfulness. So they were forced to bow down to a golden idol, or they'd be thrown into the fiery furnace, and the consequences, no matter how dire, no matter even if they would die, they were willing to face the consequences and not compromise in their faithfulness to God. Consequences doesn't deter faithfulness. And so I try to keep that same language as I go point to point. The third point, change of laws doesn't change faithfulness. So the third one was when Daniel's caught, of course, in political intrigue and trying to trap him, and they changed the rules that he could only pray to, I think it was the king. And so Daniel, change of laws didn't bother him. He carried on faithfully obeying God and praying as he normally did. And so I tried to use homiletical language with each point that I presented. And finally, bringing out the concept of the real hero of the story. It's not really Daniel and his friends, but it's actually God. And so the last point was God demonstrates his faithfulness to those who are faithful to him. And just going back through each of those stories and showing how God was faithful to Daniel and his friends each and every time that they were faithful to him. So that's how I came up with my exegetical idea, purpose, all of that, and helped to inform my homiletical idea and the way I was going to structure the sermon that I gave. I'm not perfect. I don't do a perfect job every single time, but I'm hoping that these little examples will help you as you are grappling with how to put together and begin to shape your sermon.